Okey, cepat kawan. Kita akan naik ke atas. The Malay Regiment, they were formed by the British in Malaya, and they were known as the experimental company. Because of their integrity, their fighting skills, they were eventually deployed in Singapore to Pasir Panjang, and that was where the Battle of Pasir Panjang took place. So if you look at the Battle of Singapore, Pasir Panjang seems to be the last fighting point for the Japanese. And when the Japanese attacked Pasir Panjang, that was where they tasted the real bitter taste of battle. And Lieutenant Adnan, being one of the best leaders in this .226, he actually motivated his men to fight to the very last breath. This place has once witnessed the fiercest battle in Singapore between the Malayan forces and the British with the Japanese. And this place was called the Gap. Okay, this was where the British HQ outpost was overrun. They adopted the multi-pronged approach. They have the left flank coming from Clementi Road towards Normanton Park. Then they have the right flank that actually went down from the Gap to West Coast, which is today the West Coast McDonald's. So from there, they hit south, then they hit eastwards towards Pasir Panjang Ridge Line. So from there, they concentrated their force towards Pasir Panjang Ridge Line and captured Pasir Panjang successfully on the 14th of February 1942. This drain before was filled with fire. When the British realized that the Japanese are approaching Pasir Panjang, they actually set Normanton tank on fire. Hopefully the Japanese will not have their hands on the fuel. So this destruction of the tank, it also became an obstacle for the Malay Regiment to retreat back, to retrograde back to Pasir Panjang Ridge Line. But it has also become an obstacle for the Japanese to have their approach towards the ridge line. So what we see today is actually calmness, but many of us do not know that this place was once a bloody battleground. Come guys, only a few more steps to .226. Come follow me, let's go. To any battle, to any firefight, if you can capture an objective or a high point, you dominate the battle. So when the Japanese captured .225, that's where they can see the next point, which is .226. So from here, it was where the Japanese set up their fire base. Their fire base, their temporary command post, I would say, where they put all the mortars and their big guns, and here they started to fire .226 as a support fire. To the Malay Regiment, it was partly a demoralizing factor. You know, when they saw that they can capture .225, they knew that they had no other choice but to just resist and fight till the end. This was where Lieutenant Adnan made his final stand. And this was a place where he had all his defense heavily fortified, defending this hill. And if you would like to imagine what it was like before, from here you could see the shellings and the firing from .225. From .225, the Japanese fired here heavily, they bombarded here, and this place was total chaos. And just imagine there were Japanese forces coming in front, and you have the Japanese force from Normanton or Canterbury Plain from the right, and the Japanese forces coming from the left, which is Pasir Panjang village. So this place was heavily concentrated. And because Lieutenant Adnan knew that he was totally outnumbered, I could recall that he only had about 30 to 40 fighting men on this very hill against hundreds or perhaps 1,000 Japanese approaching point 226. He had no choice but he had to motivate this man till the very last breath. So there was this popular phrase that he exclaimed right before he fought to the death. He shouted, "Biar Putih Tulang, Jangan Putih Mata," which means despite of the flesh being torn from the bone, never will anyone denounce their loyalty to the regiment and to the country. This was a place where Lieutenant Adnan actually opened fire on the Japanese, because on the morning of February 14th, the Japanese actually approached via this route and they pretend to be the Punjabis. When they were marching forward, one of Lieutenant Adnan's men realized that the formation was totally different than the typical British formation. They were in a formation of 4 men in front. So Lieutenant Adnan assessed the situation and he ordered his men to open fire. Okay, we are now at the reflections at Bukit Chandu, which tells the history of the Battle of Pasir Panjang and the Malay Regiment. Lieutenant Adnan's sacrifice to the regiment is actually a very great example of his fighting spirit as the leader of his army and also a defender of the nation. Although Lieutenant Adnan is no longer around, his values still lives on in us until today.